All right. So this is where we're going to start. We're going to start with one of the things that I like to dig into is there's a few side characters that are mentioned in Chumash in like one place. They get one verse, or maybe if they're lucky, they get mentioned a few times. But this one is a side character. She's mentioned 1.5 times, once by name and one other time, which we'll look at in a second, not by name. And this is Devorah. Everyone is familiar with, there's a different Devorah, the judge and prophet. But this is Devorah, who was Rivkah's nurse. So let's get that mouse out of the way. So Devorah is Rivkah's nurse, and the first time we hear about her by name is in this verse in this week's Parsha, this coming up, Parshah's Vayishlach. And it says, all of a sudden, we haven't ever heard this person's name before. And then we just get one verse where all of a sudden this person we're introduced to, and she dies. In the same verse, all of a sudden, Devorah, Rivkah's nurse, passes away, and she's buried under a tree. And there's different commentaries on what the word alon means, and but tree is one of them. And it seems to me to be the most literal way to interpret this, that she was buried under a tree. And it does come back later why that's significant to interpret it that way. And this place was named after her. It was called the Tree of Weeping. You know, the alon of weeping. So there's this very big event for Yaakov. Yaakov, who is, at this point in the story, I should give you a little bit of a background. So Yaakov now, the beginning of the Parsha, after Yaakov takes his whole family and all of his sheep and cattle and his big encampment, and they leave the house of his father-in-law Lavan. They're going back. Yaakov is going back home to confront Esav. That happens at the beginning of the Parsha, kind of anticlimactic. They meet and not much happens, and then they part ways. And then there's some sad stuff that happens with Shem. And then after that, we just get this one verse kind of in the middle. Devorah passes away, and Yaakov Avinu is apparently so emotionally moved by it that he names this, that he names it, that it's about crying. So that's interesting. Now, the other place that this nurse is mentioned, she mentioned in one other place, is way back when Yitzchak when Avram's servant Eliezer finds Rivkah, Yaakov's mother, and Rivkah agrees to come back with him and marry Yitzchak. And when her family sends her over back with Eliezer to Yitzchak and Avram, they send her with her nurse, Meinekes Rivkah, right? So the nurse of Rivkah, and so that is the only other time that Devorah, Meinekes Rivkah, is mentioned, but she's not mentioned by name the first time. Only when she passes away, then we find out her name. So there's one other interesting thing that I'm going to just point out here is, does anyone know how old Rivkah was when she was married to Yitzchak? Anyone want to shout that out? 3 years old? Yeah, so that comes from Midrash, and that's how Rashi says it. There are other commentaries that disagree. Ibn Ezra is one of those. He chooses to interpret that whole story a little bit differently, that she's a more marriageable age. There's different opinions. There's the 3 and 10 and I think 14. There's different ages, and the numbers with Yitzchak also are weird, which we won't get into. That's a different rabbit hole. But what he says is that she was her nurse. When Meinekes means, it comes from the same root as like actual nursing. It's like, so what does it mean? Like a nursemaid, a wet nurse. So why does a 14-year-old need a wet nurse? Somebody who's ready to get married, according to Ibn Ezra, she wasn't 3. If she was 3, it makes a little more sense. So he says she was her nurse when she was young, and apparently they were still close. So that's that. So anyways, that's where our rabbit hole starts. It starts with Devorah, the nurse of Rivkah, why she was so important, how it was that she was with Yaakov, and that they passed away and he buried her because of she's Rivkah's nurse. All of these interesting things. Who is she? What's she doing there? Why is it so meaningful when she passed away? Why was it such an intense moment? So that's where our rabbit hole starts. See, I fell down the rabbit hole. If you're ready to get started, ready to dig down that rabbit hole with me, let's go. Okay. So first question is, how did she get there? That's really the main question that all of the commentaries start asking about when in that verse, when the verse comes up that she passes away, they ask, what was she doing there? How did she even get there? So first we'll look at Rashi. And Rashi says that the way that she got there is because, so Rashi says that that Rivkah, the way it worked out, and so Yaakov ran away from home when after the whole, tricking and getting the birthright and all of that stuff. So Rivkah tells him to run and tells him, I'll let you know when to come back. So according to Rashi, that is how she let him know that it was time to come back, is that he sent Devorah to him, and then they were so she went all the way to Yaakov and his family by Lavan's house, and then they all went back together. So that's what Rashi says. Ramban, Nachmanides, gives us two slightly different versions of how Devorah could have gotten to be there with Jacob. And so what the two options that Ramban gives us are either that she was, I'm seeing which one comes first here. So the first possibility he offers us is that original Meinekes Rivkah that went with and accompanied Rivkah to Yitzchak was a different nurse. It was a different nurse. It's not Devorah, and she always stayed. Devorah was always back at home in the house of Bethuel and Lavan, Rivkah's family, and that's where Yaakov ended up. And so when he got there, then he met Devorah, his mother's childhood nurse, and then she was on her way back with him. So then the Ramban gives us another option, just seeing which one that is. So hang on, I gotta check my notes here. It's hard to read it on the screen. You can read it. Maybe somebody else can get it to me if you get it before I do. Yeah, fine. So anyways, the Ramban gives two different options there. I can't decipher between the two right now. But one of those options is that she was there. Yeah, you figured it out?
Now that you say that the first option is that the one that came with Rivkah when she came to get married, after she walked off Rivkah, she went back to...
Oh, that's right. That she went back. You're right. So option A is that she did accompany Rivkah and then she went back home. She dropped her off and came back home. Option B is that was a different nurse altogether, and Devorah was there the entire time. Either way, this kind of gives us a little bit more background into why she was so important, why Yaakov would be crying when she passed away, because she would have been there the entire time. And Ramban suggests that maybe she was even involved, not just in raising Yaakov's mother, Rivkah, but she was involved in raising Yaakov's children as well, and maybe also his wives. So there's like multiple generations now of family that this Devorah was involved in taking care of, which I think is pretty cool. So that's the gif to accompany this. She was there the whole time. She was with Yaakov the entire time. She wasn't, according to Ramban, she wasn't sent back and forth because he says it doesn't make sense. If she's such an old woman who was around when Rivkah was young, then Rivkah wouldn't be sending her across the desert to go deliver mail. All right. There's one other option here for how she got there. And this is from the Malbim. And this is an interesting one. That what he suggests is that he says that after Yaakov and Esav met up, they parted ways, and Esav went back home. And so what Malbim says is after Rivkah passed away, then she was left she was left there. I guess Yitzchak had passed away, or he was blind, but yeah, he said Rivkah had passed away, and she was left in this house, and the only family left, the only people there was Esav, who was, as we know, a pretty bad guy, and his wives, who also we're told were not so great. They were doing idol worship and stuff. So she was left. She was left there, and she didn't like it. So she made the trek herself across the desert to go to, I don't know if it was I assume there's desert she had to trek across. So she left to go seek out Yaakov, and that's why she was with them. And that's also, he says that the verse is telling us, when the verse tells us that she was there at all, it's also telling us what a righteous woman she was, because it's telling us she couldn't handle living with Esav and his family, and she went and sought out Yaakov to go live with him. All right. So the next question is that we've been kind of getting to, and we've kind of answered in our own ways, which is, why was it such a big deal that she passed away? Why is the Torah telling us about it? Why was it such an emotionally significant event for Yaakov? And Rashi's answer, and this comes from Midrash, and this is kind of what a lot of the direction that a lot of the commentaries go in, is that the reason why it was such a big deal is because this verse is actually hinting to us about the death of Rivkah, that we're not actually told about explicitly, and there's a whole midrash behind it, that why aren't we told about it explicitly, is because when she passed away, Yitzchak was blind and not able to take part in the burial. Yaakov wasn't there, and the only person who could be doing all the funeral and burial stuff would have been Esav, and I guess the people around felt like that would have been degrading for her, and so they secretly buried her with no pomp and circumstance, nobody there. So, and therefore the Chumash, the Torah, does kind of mirrors that and doesn't tell us about it, and kind of lets her pass away in this hinted way, in a secret way that doesn't tell us explicitly, but that it is telling us in this verse when Devorah dies, that also that's where somehow Yaakov also knew that his mother had passed away then too. And therefore, that's what this event was. And he was naming this place, not just after Devorah's death, but after his mother's death as well. And that's why he was crying. But now this is one of my favorite things that Midrash does, is kind of tells you this biographical information about people that you never heard before. And especially later on in all of when the Jews are in the desert, it makes everybody somehow be connected to Moses. They're all part of the Rabinowitz family. But here, Devorah is getting connected to our family, right? The patriarchs and matriarchs family. So there's a midrash that says that, in my thing here, yeah. So there's a midrash that says that that Bilhah and Zilpah, those are the maidservants that were also wives of Jacob. And so Jacob altogether had four wives, four people who were the mothers of his children. And according to this midrash, Bilhah and Zilpah. So usually the one we got to think Rashi mentions that Bilhah. I think Rashi mentions that, but usually I think what I've heard is Bilhah and Zilpah were also Lavan's daughters. But in this midrash it says that Bilhah and Zilpah were the daughters of this guy whose name was Achesi, and that Lavan found this guy, a guy who was sold into slavery, and rescued him, and then brought him back and gave him one of his maidservants to be his wife, and then their daughters were Lavan's servants, and then he gave them gave human beings to Yaakov. So, but the little tidbit of information there is that this guy, Bilhah and Zilpah's father, was the brother, or his sister was Devorah. Devorah, the nurse of Rivkah. That's according to this midrash. So that would make Devorah not just Rivkah's aunt, but also Rivkah's nurse, but also kind of our aunt in a way, I guess. Does that make sense? Yeah. It would make them build, whichever the Shvatim are descended from Bilhah and Zilpah, then their aunt is Devorah. So then she's connected to the family. There's another way in which she's connected to the family. So when I started digging around, yeah, there you go. Alf says that he's a member of the family too. So when I started digging around for Devorah information about this particular Devorah Meinekes Rivkah in Seder HaDoros, which is like a history, but if anyone isn't familiar with it, it's one of my favorite books ever. It goes through the entire history of the Jewish people. And in Seder HaDoros, when it mentions Devorah Meinekes Rivkah, it refers to her as Devorah Bas Utz. So who was Utz? Not the chips, right? So who was Utz? Now, if we go back, does anyone know who Utz was? So, yeah? Oh, yeah, fine. But he's also a member of the Abrahamic family. So Utz was, yeah. All right. So here we find out who Utz was. Utz was, his firstborn. It was Nachor's son, which means Avram's nephew. He was Nachor's son, and he was, what, grandson? What? And then he was also the brother of Besuel, right? So if Devorah is Bas Utz, and Rivka's father was Besuel, right? And Besuel's brother is Utz, and Utz's daughter then is Devorah, then that would make Rivkah and Devorah first cousins. So Devorah, according to this, would be Rivka's nurse that took care of her, but also her older cousin that was taking care of her in her youth and throughout her entire life. Just another little interesting thing I found when I tracked down where Seder HaDoros got that from is from this midrash, Sefer HaYashar, which lots of people have interesting things to say about. But one of the things that it adds is that it's listing off so I have this here. It's listing off all these children, and we see that Utz has some sons and his daughter Devorah, and then it says Besuel has Shachar and Lavan and Rivkah, which to me was a surprise because who's that guy? Like, I've never heard of him before. We only ever hear about Rivkah and Lavan. So I just thought that was interesting. All of a sudden we get some mystery until we didn't know about. Okay, I have that in there again for some reason. One more way in which Devorah is part of the family is that there's this medrash which drops this bombshell on us that who was Meinekes Rivkah, the nurse of Rivkah? It was the mother of Rivkah, Rivkah's mother. So which we don't really hear about at all. But according to this, then when Rivkah was sent with her nurse, it was her mother. I don't know why it would refer to her that way, but it does. So, in that case, that's like one of our great grandmothers. Because now you're doing the Ramban thing, and maybe it's two different ones. All right. Fine. Hang on. Does it? Yeah, I say Meinekes Rivkah, image of Rivkah. I don't know which pasuk that is on. Yeah, look it up. Tell me. All right. What? That's when she passes away? All right, good. Fine. So we've got that answered. So it is Devorah. And I've seen other places where it mentions it in that context. Okay. One more thing. I mean, there's a whole bunch more things. I keep on saying one more thing. There's a lot. There's like 89 more things. I had 10 more things. All right. So, but another thing about who she was, who Devorah was, is in Targum Yonason which is a translation, but it's also a commentary. And the way he translates it is it's an Aramaic translation, but by nurse, he translates it with this word as pedagogsa, right? So I already translated it here as pedagogue. So pedagogue means a teacher, an educator, which kind of changes everything, because nurse just means somebody like a nanny, Rivka's nanny. But here, it's more like her governess or something. Then it becomes her educator, which I think is cool, because that, to me, gives perhaps more reason why that, besides for Rashi's reason about Rivka also having passed away. But even without that, I feel like her being Rivka's teacher tells us why she was such an important figure and worthy of being wept over. However, I looked it up. I looked up the pedagogue. Oh, there's a pedagogue. Anyone know who that is? That's Ichabod Crane. Yeah, he was a school teacher, and eventually ended up without a head, I think. Anyways, yes, he is a pedagogue. He's referred to many times in the film as a pedagogue. Pedagogue, by the way. So this word is, what's interesting about it, it's a Greek and Latin word, but the original Greek meaning wasn't somebody who teaches children, it's the servant who brings the children to school. So then we're back to her just being a servant. So maybe she wasn't an educator. However, there is another way in which Devorah Meinekes Rivkah gets connected to teaching people, to education. And that is through the other Devorah that we know of. It says that, by the way, I was talking to my wife about this. I'm like, did you know Devorah taught under a date tree? And my wife's like, yes, of course. I'm a woman. I've learned not. But I have not. So, yes, that was something that was surprising to me. So that was where Devorah, the judge and prophet, held court, was under a tree. Do I have Rashi? No, I took Rashi out there. Rashi just said it's because... Wait, was there another one? Oh, no, I have them out of order. So, fine, yeah. There's supposed to be this one first, that she held court under the date tree. And then Rashi has this answer, just because she owned a lot of trees. So, yeah. Sorry, there should have been a setup and punchline there for a really funny joke. Under a tree. That's Tony, I think, from somebody. It's somebody from West Side Story. And he's saying under a tree. It's part of the lyrics of that's it, yes. Okay, so, I jumped ahead. So, we're going to stick on this guy for a while, and then we'll go back to this, because I don't want to stare at the singing guy for too long. What were we saying? Did I not put the source in there? We just switched right to it. Hang on, where is it? All right, this is an important source, but apparently it's not up. I don't have it on the screen. But according to the Bali Tosfos, they say that the idea that Devorah held court under a tree. So in a verse, what does it says? Why does it say Devorah sat under the date tree of Devorah? Why are you telling me it's her tree? So Tosfos says, the Bali Tosfos say that it's because it's not this Devorah's tree, it's the tree that Devorah Meinekes Rivkah was buried under. And she sat under that tree. So that would mean what? She was. Where does it say? Where does it say? Oh yeah, I don't know what he's talking about. Eureka, no. But the locations match up. Right? Yeah. Right. So that's the same place also that tells us that Devorah was buried. Devorah Meinekes Rivkah. So, according to that, the locations would match up, and then it gives us a significance that Devorah, the first Devorah, became the kind of a symbol or something that the prophet and judge Devorah set up court under her tree at her grave site. Okay, now we get him again. Okay, there is one more reason why I dug into this whole topic of Meinekes Rivkah, the nurse of Rivkah, to begin with. And that is because there is a book called, we're going to go back, fine. This is kind of revealing the punchline, but there is a book called Meinekes Rivkah, and it's not about Meinekes Rivkah at all. It's a Musar sefer about teaching women how to make a Jewish home. And it was written in the, when does it say that she lived? It was written in the 1600s, 1500s maybe? No, yeah, I think very early 1600s. She lived at the end of the 1500s. So it was written at the end of the 1500s, beginning of the 1600s. And that makes Meinekes Rivkah, this book, be, I should back up. So it's called Meinekes Rivkah because that's a thing that Jewish books do, is they take a phrase from a verse and kind of do like a play on words, often with the author's name. What's fun is that there is no other, it happens with Devorah David or whatever. It happens with men's names. For there to be a sefer Meinekes Rivkah is fun and interesting because it's one of the only earliest, before 100, 200 years ago, 150 years ago, whatever it is, books, classic Jewish scholarly books written by women. And Seder Haderos, which I mentioned before, mentions her in glowing terms as the Habrabanis, Hardarshanis, Meinekes Rivkah, Bas Meir. So she was apparently just this scholarly figure. I want to note one more thing, is that Seder Haderos has, after it goes through all the history, then has a list of Sfarim, of books, of Jewish books, and it has a list of personalities, of the authors, the people who wrote those books. And it's a list of books that has over 2,500 entries, I believe. And only 2 of them are written by women. Just to give you only 2 of them are written by women, which isn't surprising that there aren't a lot, but just to put it in perspective. The other one is a translation of Josephus into Yiddish. So this is the only scholarly you could argue, if you look at the content of it, that it's like a homemaking guide, but she has a lot of sources in there, which Gemara and Midrash and Kabbalistic stuff has a lot of sources, which happens in these types of books, these manuals for Jewish housewives. But she goes into more depths than those. Usually those are they're like adding those sources just to kind of give credit to an idea, just so you know, like, oh, this is serious because this comes from Gemara. But she kind of goes through the idea and like how it gets there and explains it more. And one of the things that happens is she actually has some chidushim in there that she doesn't advertise it. There's new ideas that she came up with, new different ways to interpret things. So I'm going to share one of those with you. We're going to go back to the very beginning, not the very beginning, but after the very beginning, when Adam and Eve, after they're thrown out of Gan Eden, then they are given these curses. And everyone knows that the curse for a woman is that pregnancy will be difficult. One of the curses, right? The pregnancy will be painful. So the Sefer Meinekes Rivkah, what she does is she expands that idea, and she says that applies not just to an actual childbirth, but to the entire experience of raising children. That's part of that curse, is that raising kids is difficult, right? But she points something out. She says that actually doesn't make that verse doesn't make any sense, because if we go back, the way it says that is Hashem says it in the first person. I will make this painful for you. I'll give you great pain, right? So what she points out is Hashem doesn't do that. Whenever Hashem gives us curses, they are in this passive form. It will happen. When Hashem gives us brachas, then that's that Hashem uses the first person. I will do it. But Hashem is kind of removed from curses and doesn't say it in the first person. So she points out why is this curse different that it's said in the first person? And her answer is, it must not be a curse. It must be a bracha. That the fact that childbirth and raising children in general is going to be difficult isn't a curse. It's a bracha, that all of those challenges and all that difficulty, the more you have to deal with, the more you're going to get out of it in the long run. And so it's not a curse, it's a bracha, which I think is a beautiful idea. Yes, this is written in Yiddish, in a very old Yiddish that was very difficult for me to understand. which, yeah. So, yeah, just kind of tying this all together. If we take this back to just thinking about this idea of parenthood and motherhood specifically in a Jewish context, taking this back to Devorah, who could literally have been one of our great 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 grandmothers, or maybe she was just a teacher, an educator of our ancestors. But she was somebody who was, she put together a bunch of these, or enough of them. It seems pretty clear that she was somebody that was involved in multiple generations of raising the people who created our people. And so that's cool to me, that she's somebody who gets mentioned in one little verse that you could blink and miss it. But she might have been an incredibly important and influential person for all of us. We don't know what she taught Rivkah and what trickled down to us. So, all right. That's it. That's hang on. I have a little thing for that. All right. That's it. That's the rabbit hole. See, I came out of the rabbit hole now.